On this episode of FieldLink, we're joined by United Soybean Board members and Maryland and New Jersey growers Mary Stewart and Patrick Giberson to learn about how Soybean Checkoff funds are being reinvested into research and market development for all soybean growers across the United States. Plus, Jody Lawrence joins us from Nashville to discuss the latest commodity markets and how the EPA's upcoming decision on renewable fuels could impact producers. Stay tuned for this episode of FieldLink. This episode is brought to you by Coron Metra. Your crop is hungry for nitrogen. Talk to your Helena representative to learn how Coron Metra can help feed your crop this season. And welcome to FieldLink. I'm your host, Bill Smith, and we've got some very special guests today from USB, the United Soybean Board, and we're really excited to have them join us today to learn a little bit about what USB is doing to help promote soybeans in the industry, as well as talk a little bit about some of the research and investments that they're making to make soybeans more prominent in our country and really around the world. Joining me today is Mary Stewart and Patrick Giberson. Folks, welcome to FieldLink.
Thank you for having us.
Glad to have us on. Appreciate it.
You bet. Well, let's get started before we dive into a lot of the conversation today. Let's talk a little bit. First off, Mary, why don't you take a couple seconds and introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll move on over to Patrick.
Yep. So we're right on the Mason-Dixon line. We've got a small farm. My husband and I farm soybeans, of course, corn, sorghum. We have a lot of direct sales with straw and hay. We sell seed. I do agritourism, so I do field trips. I'm neck deep in it now. I had a group of fourth graders come out today. So we were out there like drowned rats, but making the most out of the weather, just like we always have to do. But I have a food truck. We do special events. So we're just very diversified here, small scale Maryland. So a lot of people don't realize that there is agriculture in Maryland, but there is. And my family has a dairy farm, so we help support that.
Wow. Okay. So this is really interesting. I want to peel this back a little bit. So Mary, you and your family have an operation in Maryland. You're also in the dairy business. And of course, you mentioned raising soybeans and corn and other products. Tell us a little bit about this food truck. That's a little different.
It all started, how much time do we have? A couple hours, right? It all started back during COVID, where we started making cheese out of our milk from our dairy farm, because our milk co-op told us to get some milk off the market because of the processing. And we didn't want to dump it, and because we worked too hard for that, and we didn't want to see it just go down the drain. So I started making cheese. I didn't have any kind of retail store or anything at the time. And I was like, well, cheese is fun, but everybody will drive for ice cream. And because we do the events and I do the field trips and things, I just thought, why not a food truck? Because what's one more thing? But it is a lot of fun. I do take it off site and do events and things, but I keep it on the farm for a lot of our events. Mainly it ties into the birthday parties and the special events. And it also helps tell our story about the dairy when I do the field trips and things. So like we're selling our milk to DFA, and then it just helps me bring it all home when the kids can have ice cream at the end, and our milk is going into that, obviously. So it's a full story about cow to cone.
The cow to cone, that's really an interesting concept. And I think, Mary, besides the entrepreneurship and the business side of it, what a great opportunity to get in front of the consumer to tell the story for agriculture.
Yeah, I love doing it. I love it. It's so cool. People want to learn, and the best way to learn is from the people, from doing it. The best way to learn about farming and food and everything that goes into it is to talk to a farmer directly. And I think people are really craving that relationship and that connection.
That's great. What an opportunity to make that connection. Moving on, Patrick, tell us a little, from New Jersey, tell us a little bit about your operation and tell us a little bit about you.
Patrick Giberson, New Jersey, a USB director, farmer, obviously. Farm with my parents. We're a pretty good sized farm for New Jersey. Once again, as Mary said, well, we don't really think of Maryland as agricultural. See, I do on the other sense because of the Eastern Shore. Most people, though, Jersey is like, you actually farm there. Yeah, we do. We grow corn, soybeans, some hay, small square bales for horse people, and wheat occasionally, not all the time. I didn't have any in this year. Just the drought. It was so late by the time, it started getting a little bit of moisture. It was no sense in planting it. But no, we also run a honey preserve on the farm during the winter months once everything is off. We do to the public. It's open to the public. We get a lot where I'm at, kind of central New Jersey. We're about 45 minutes, give or take, out of Philadelphia, and probably about an hour and a half or so south of New York City. So we get a lot of people that don't have access to hunting, where they're at, obviously.
Mhm.
And that works out pretty well and, supplements the income. I think all of us right now are, in the farming economics the way they are, that, we're all looking for other alternatives to try to, generate some different income, besides just grain production.
Wow, and what a great location geographically for that type of agritourism in central New Jersey. And look, I worked in New Jersey, and you're right. A lot of folks don't realize I'm from Nebraska, but I worked in New Jersey, and I always call back home, and I tell my friends, if I fell out of an airplane at night and landed in the middle of New Jersey, I wouldn't know where I'm at. I would honestly think I was in central Nebraska. I don't know if you do, Patrick, but a lot of center pivot irrigation. There's a lot of corn and soybeans grown there.
Yeah, like you said, most people don't really understand that, we are, the Garden State. I mean,
Right.
that's, our nickname. Of course, it's slowly becoming the warehouse state from overdevelopment. But no, like you said, we have a lot of agricultural production. And actually, south of me, there's even a lot more of it than there is right around me.
Wow. Interesting. Well, hey, thank you both for being here today on the FieldLink Podcast. And, we really want to talk a little bit about USB and some of the initiatives that you all are working on to help producers, have a more viable, market, as well as bringing different types of investments towards innovation. So, Patrick, tell us a little bit about what USB's mission is, and what are some of the priorities at this time.
Well, our mission, and kind of going back to what Mary was talking about with the ice cream, people don't realize the aspect of where it comes from a farm to on their table. And we've kind of lost that. It's been a disconnect. And promoting that in a bunch of different ways, educationally, just to the public is one of the ways. Also to our industry partners that we deal with, and actually communicating back to the farmers what we're doing. I mean, the farmers are the ones doing this and putting the money into the checkoff and allowing us to, represent them and funding things that we believe are going to move that needle forward and help, grow that either export or even domestically, however you look at it, just trying to make a little bit more money go into their pockets for what they've invested.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point. Patrick, can you elaborate a little bit about the checkoff? How does that really work for some of our folks that may not quite be familiar with how USB operates?
Well, any of the beans that we sell, when they go to an elevator, the elevator writes that down. Whatever your settlement is, 0.5% goes out of that. That goes into a state board. There's qualified state boards as well. Then the other half goes to the national, which is USB. So every soybean, every bushel of soybeans that are sold, a percentage of that goes to the checkoff program. And that program is totally farmer funded, because I know there was a lot of comments about it. And, as you said earlier, we're not going to get into the policy end of it, but, we're farmer funded, we're farmer led.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point for our listeners to know, that USB is being funded by the folks that are growing this crop, and they're taking a portion of those funds to reinvest into the future of that crop. So, Mary, let's talk a little bit about committees. Talk to us about your structure.
Okay, I think it's relevant just to say we all have our silos, I guess. So there's 77 farmer leaders. So every state that is a producer of soybeans has a representation. So in Maryland, I'm one of two. I think Patrick might be the one and only in New Jersey. Yay. But then every state, those I states have a hand, I think there's 3 or 4 probably at least for each of it, because they're doing so many soybeans. So East Coast is really represented here today. So we're divided by our supply and demand. And then we have our health and nutrition, work group are innovation and technology and our infrastructure and connectivity. I serve on the health and nutrition board. Well, not the board, the work group. And then I think Patrick's on the infrastructure and connectivity. And then we're both on communication and education. So I would be able to speak well to the health and nutrition side of things, of what we're working on there. And then he could probably speak about some of the projects in the infrastructure and connectivity. And then we could collaborate on the communication.
Well, there certainly is a lot of, I'll just call it chatter in the market today about health and nutrition. We're not going to talk about policy, but a lot of things are being talked about. But some of the research you guys are doing at USB can certainly maybe influence or help them, I guess, policymakers or even just the community. They better understand how nutrition is impacted by soybeans.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's awesome to know that because we've invested in our product, the research is already there. And I think the reoccurring commentary around it is that you can't argue science, like that science matters. Like there are facts in the world that we should rely on, and we've got that data there because of research money and investments. So it's got our back, and we've got all the information we kind of need to stay solid on many of those questions. And the awesome thing is maybe now people are looking into it or researching it, like taking a little bit of time now that there's so much chatter about seed oils. Now we've kind of taken that as an opportunity to make sure we're always that number one click.
Right.
Put money, and we've already got the data there, and we've already got the collaboration and the partnerships in the marketplace that when people are researching and trying to find out more information about things, we've got all the data there that supports that it needs to stay in the diet. It's a healthy choice. And so you can always look at it with the glass half full or half empty, but it's kind of been an opportunity to be a leader in the conversation because the research and data is already there.
Yeah, Mary, what's really neat about what USB's done is, and you referenced it, you've done all the research. We've been doing this research around nutrition and health for a very long time. Right. While there's a lot of noise in the market today about health and nutrition, which is great, you're prepared. You have information and science to back up, I guess, the facts, correct?
Right. Yeah, and I think the good news also is that we're not just riding a trend wave, which there's so many trends and you can hop on that bandwagon, but we've got longevity in our favor. So it's not just research for the past 5 months. It's research actually for the past, 10 plus years. So, that's a great track record.
Yeah. And I think, and you can confirm this, but it's pretty much third-party unbiased research too. And that's really important for our listeners to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. It's got to be through the universities. It's got to be can't be funded. We can't just go pick whoever we want to go tell us a story that we want to hear. It's got to be very neutral so we can use that data however.
I think the underlying message is, Mary, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is, soybeans, soybean oil, protein, so forth, is nutritious. There's some great advantages with soybeans. What are some of the ones that I guess USB likes to highlight?
So I've been working on the animal side a little bit.
Okay.
So there's a lot of advantages obviously there. So on the animal side, I know that mainly, we know that animals are our number one consumer for our product. So I think USB as a whole, it's safe to say that our largest consumer is animals. So we put a big focus on our investment to make sure that animal agriculture is being supported also through USB. So we've done that through collaboration with other checkoff. Like I know something that came through our committee with health and nutrition is we're collaborating right now with the pork checkoff because they put in a proposal. They're interested in pursuing sous vide processed pork.
Yeah, right.
Sous vide, thank you. I always feel like I'm butchering it because that was something I didn't know a lot about because I'm not super domestic, but they think there's research on that they've been working on that if they can have it prepared and already prepared that way, that it will have a stronger marketplace. People will buy it. So they asked for some support from USB on just some of that money to get that off the ground for them in a larger scale across the country is what they're hoping for. And my committee was like, most of us that serve on USB are also animal ag because it's a beautiful diversification. So we want to make sure that we're raising that bar up for opportunities, whether it's, pigs are eating soybeans. So it's just a kind of a win-win. So if we can help support the pork producers of America, it's also supporting the soy farmers of America. And we see that over again on the high oleic soybeans too with dairy. That's been a huge success story. Like USB's invested in the genetics of high oleic, and the dairy industries had a huge pickup with embracing that. So I think the latest numbers are there was about 800,000 acres of high oleic beans grown last year. And
Wow.
that's only track record to greatly expand in acres because dairy's having such a great success story with they're using that high oleic bean into their feed ration. And then as a result, there's higher fat content in the milk. And as a dairy farmer, you get paid better, like more money for your milk fat components and things. So
Right.
So that was all funded from USB, whether I don't know if the dairy industry would recognize that or not, but that was another collaboration that we're seeing that investment in USB pay off for some of our animal sector. There's like a ton of things I could probably talk about.
Well, that's really interesting. I think it's important for listeners to know that, soybeans as a whole, a strong portion of the volume of soybeans, at least in the United States, goes towards animal nutrition. What's the average percent as a whole?
Ooh. I should know that number offhand. I want to say I think I might be pulling a number out of the air, but I want to say it's like 80% or something of our beans are going towards animal. It's over 50. I think that's safe to say.
I think that's the point, whether it's 50 or 80 or 70. Right. It's a big percentage, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely our largest consumer. We love chickens. We love pigs. We love dairy. Aquaculture can't be left behind. What else do we love, Patrick? We love trade and all the other, it's all important.
It's actually 97% of our
Thank you.
Wow.
Goes into animal ag.
That sounded too good to be true. That's a big number.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I think that's a really important point for listeners to understand is 97%, as Patrick pointed out, that of the soybeans in the U.S. are going towards animal agriculture. And there's a lot of noise out there about human consumption, but really, really, a lot of our crops are going towards the animal side. Patrick, tell us a little bit about some of the initiatives you're working on in your committee.
Well, our work group is kind of, unique in comparison to the others. Each of the groups that Mary had talked about with innovation, technology, health and nutrition, and myself in infrastructure and connectivity. The other work groups have a supply side, a demand side. All right. So they kind of work in conjunction with each other. I guess as the name states, connectivity. Mm-hmm. We are both supply and demand in the same work group. We're not separate in that because what we had done, we decided to pull kind of the demand part out of us. We started another work group on export. So we have an export work group now.
Okay. To
try to, keep an open mind and working with what we have abroad. And, let's face it, a lot of our beans are exported. So we felt that was a good place to open something else up to look at what markets are telling us, market indicators, where we're headed with things. Because if, like with the biodiesel end of it, if that gets going, and I don't know if this is going to be a question, I don't want to be jumping ahead of you.
Sure.
If we start that and go down that road, the obvious part with the 80-20 on a bean, 20% being oil, 80% being the protein, we're going to have a boatload of soy meal to move somewhere. And we can't really up or put that many more animals on domestically to take that up. So obviously it's got to go out of our borders to somebody.
Right.
And that's kind of why we looked into the export on that end of it. But anyway, to our work group, we kind of also bring what the other work groups are doing a little bit together. So if Mary's work group has something that they're looking at, we're maybe having that alternative to, hey, we can connect them with this. This looks like a fit. So we kind of fill the niche in between work groups, I guess, if you want to look at it. Okay. The infrastructure end of it, road, river, rail. I mean, we look, that's our main portion of that, looking for bottlenecks. How can we supply quicker, make sure that our people, our end users, are getting what they need on time, those type of things.
Tell us about that dredging the Mississippi. I live in Memphis on the Mississippi, so we're somewhat familiar with that.
The lower Mississippi, they are doing a project down there. And when I say project, what happens with USB, the funding we put in is to try to get other entities involved in it. So it's not like, all the farmers are paying for this whole project.
Sure.
The monies that we put in, seed money, the Army Corps of Engineers, get them involved, get other outside people, contractors involved in it. But the project, the way they're doing it right now, is lowering it 5 feet, all right, from 45 to 50 feet. And, you kind of think, well, big deal. What's that going to do?
Right.
Well, it does a lot, because it actually 500,000 more bushels go on one of those ships because of the water level being dropped down, or their draft. So they can actually load a lot more product on these ships getting in and out of these ocean going vessels, which lowers the cost of shipping by about 13 cents a bushel.
Wow.
Which multiply, 4 million bushel going out on a boat, it adds up pretty quick.
It adds up fast. Yeah.
Yeah. And it keeps us, competitive with the rest of the world. And the other thing is too, even before we get to that point, we got barge traffic coming down the Mississippi. Lock and Dam 25, they worked on that. Same thing, seed money funded by USB. We went from 600 feet to 1,200 feet on that. So now we got bigger barge tows that come down, and anytime you do that, once again, cheaper freight. Mm-hmm. So all that helps us be competitive, where, our competition coming out of South America, their infrastructure is not like ours.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point, Patrick. Infrastructure is a really big item. It's for agriculture. It has been. We've been in a leading position for a long time. But like you mentioned, some of our locks, some of our dams, some of our railways, they're getting a little long in the tooth, and they need a little help. And it feels like USB, along with many others, are stacking hands to help figure out the greater good here.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at it, even on our roadways as well, it's called the Eisenhower system for a reason. That's who was president at that point. So yeah, we're going back a little bit here.
Yes, we are.
So, and the same thing, all the locks and dams on the Mississippi. I mean, it's in some sense, I don't want to say it's antiquated, but it needs addressing. And, even with the highways, we got over 4 million miles of highway in this country. So we have a purpose there too. We got polymers out of high oleic beans that we use as binders in asphalt. So, I mean, you give me a problem and I'll give you soy as an answer.
Wow. And I think that's a really great point. Not only is USB helping fund some of these infrastructure projects, but you're helping fund research that can help those infrastructure projects be more efficient and effective long term.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, we're always looking forward at USB. Like you said, we know what problems are out there. We don't always have a crystal ball to see what's going to happen, but we have market intelligence. We have some great people on staff there too, and I want to give them kudos, that feed us, Mary and myself and the other directors, the other 75 of them, that we get the information we need to make the decisions that we need to make for the 500,000 farmers that are growing soybeans.
Yeah, wow, that's really awesome stuff. Okay, gang, let's talk a little bit about some bio-based innovations and maybe some of the things that USB is focusing on. What are some recent breakthroughs in soy bio-based technologies do you believe have some great potential to really disrupt traditional industries, and why is that important to soybean producers?
I think we both probably get very excited about the opportunities with biofuels. God, the timing could be so perfect. I just feel like for that to really take off. And sometimes I just don't understand why it's such a hurdle. It just seems like we need to get everybody in a room to just figure out how to make it happen, because it makes sense. And for so many reasons, for the economy, for the environment, for keeping acres farming and not in other, development, or, I think Patrick and I are seeing a lot of development pressure and a lot of every kind of pressure, solar pressure. Like we're losing farm ground faster than anything else, I think, in our area. So we've got to keep our farmers viable, and this could be such a winning ticket for that. I really do feel that way. We had an opportunity to go to New York City because New York City is fully biodiesel. Mm-hmm. And we got to witness and kind of just see and hear from the people that are using it direct. And they've been doing it for 5 years. Pat, I feel like you're so much better with remembering all the statistics and things, but it's such a success story there. And so I know in Maryland, we have a task force where we're working on trying to get it just throughout our state for all of our state vehicles, I guess, and just start with something small so we can roll it out even for a greater audience. But yeah, like it just seems like a big hurdle that some places are utilizing it, and it's a conversation everywhere, but trying to get it a little bit more traction there. There's a lot of opportunity for sure in marine and aviation and rail. Rail might be, I feel like we've already got the buy-in from, there's 6 rail companies, and they already have committed that they would like to see it move forward. I think it's just engagement. Like now we just need to figure out how to get it out into consumers. That might be the hurdle.
Yeah, from the and I think stepping back a little bit, USB was involved, correct, in helping fund some of that biodiesel research and all these biofuel projects back in the day, correct?
Yeah, a lot of it even started through state boards and state soybean councils to get that ball moving forward. But people don't realize the impact economically too, which leads into this bio-based. It creates about 3.9 million jobs in this country, a bio-based industry itself, and about $489 million worth of revenue, or billion, I'm sorry. It takes oil off the market, or petroleum product, about 9.5 million barrels. It's a big win for everybody. And, like Mary said, we have hurdles to go through to get the biodiesel going. Sure. But a lot of it too is where, big oil is going to fight us. Well, I don't want to fight here. I want everybody to work together. Alternative energies are great. But we need to work with what we have. Solar's not going to cut it. It's never going to power the grid that we have with the limited. You'd have to cover the whole country in solar panels, and that doesn't work. Wind's not going to do it. So you already have the infrastructure there from the oil industry to put biodiesel to work. You have the pipelines, so you got to change some pumps around. But everything fits there. It's a now fix. If, everything else comes into fruition later, so be it. But for right now, we need all hands on deck to become energy independent in this country. And soybeans are a part of that solution. And, that's just the biodiesel end. The firefighting foam, I don't know. I'm sure that you've heard of this, TF 1122.
Tell our listeners a little more about firefighting foam. Yes, I've heard a little bit about it, but not everybody has.
All right. Company out of Georgia, Cross Plains. They started this, and we actually, as QSSBs, our qualified state boards, we broached this and got funding for it, where we got a pallet of this stuff to try to put out to some of our local fire companies and try to get people on board with it. The great thing about it, you don't have to change any of the equipment. The inductor works the same. Pressures are the same. Water amounts are the same. Everything works the same as what the foam they're using now that has chemicals in it. Big talking point here, no PFAS. And everybody's heard of that, forever chemicals. This does not have that. We have got great reviews from the people that we've gave these pails out to try. It works better than what they got, with no side effects and no destroying the environment or anything else. So the results have been good. Actually, I think Cross Plains has expanded it now a little bit. I think it's about 19 different areas that they actually have people selling the product now, or moving the product in regional areas. I believe at this point we have about 5 or 6, maybe 7 states that are taking this on. Jersey, not quite yet. We're working on it. I've had, like you said, good reviews, but at local levels, it's one thing. Going through the bureaucracy and the red tape at the state level,
Sure.
different story.
Takes a little time for that, but still a new innovation, and a portion of that product is soy based, and truly could have a phenomenal impact if you start to spread that out across the U.S. and beyond. That's an awesome story there. What are some other bio-based innovations that our listeners might be interested in learning about?
Pure bond plywood, get it at your Home Depots. You don't have the formaldehyde in it. They're using soy flour as an adhesive, and soy flour is also part of the firefighting foam. It takes, once again, it's taking all the nasty chemicals out of what you're in your environment. So, now you're in your house, you're a carpenter. Besides saving firefighters, we're saving, carpenters as well, I guess.
Right. Well, and homeowners long term.
Yeah, and homeowners, yeah. I mean, just taking all these chemicals out of things that don't need to be there with the use of soy. Some of the other ones too that we have, and this is on the high oleic end, there's a company, Fuchs, and it is a fire retardant hydraulic oil used mainly in mining applications, which you probably don't want a fire being down in the mine.
Right.
Yeah, so we've been funding with them and working with them, and it's showing great signs there. It's, it'll end up being international as well. So it's a great product. The other one too would be the bar and chain oil. DeWalt has that at Home Depots. There's quite a few places that have that now. So once again, if you're cutting wood, you're near, in a commercial industry, if you're cutting near creeks or waterways or whatever, there's no issues with this. It's safe for the environment, and it still does the job it needs to do for the bar oil on the chainsaw.
Wow, and that's a great point. You have some spillage if you're out in a forested area. Maybe there's a waterway nearby. You don't have to worry about those petroleum-based products maybe getting into those waterways.
Yeah. Also, tires, Skechers shoes, straws.
And the list goes on, doesn't it? It's amazing when you start really thinking about how the soybean can impact, really all consumers' parts of their lives. As you just mentioned, we talked a lot about industrial items that Patrick pointed out, but Mary, Skechers shoes, come on. Every kid needs a pair of shoes to go back to school, and soybeans could be a part of that.
Yeah. I just ran a 5K in my Skechers shoes. I'm not going to say they helped me finish strong, but they got me there.
They got you to the finish line, though, didn't they? That's awesome. That's awesome. Yep. That's great. Well, there's a lot of talk today about SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, and it's catching a lot of hot headlines. And, again, I don't want to get into policy today, but let's talk a little bit about how USB is helping educate consumers as well as the industry about, I guess, the power of SAF.
Well, like you said, we're going back to actually what the committee that we sit on, communication education. So we're there to promote and to educate, obviously, and communicate.
Right.
And SAF, I mean, it probably has one of the biggest areas to expand moving forward, as a biodiesel product, sustainable aviation fuel, any of those products. The biggest hurdles there, once again, is trying to get, without going into policy, getting the policy right.
Sure.
The education part of it, yeah, I mean, there's nothing barring us from getting to that point. We have the technology part of it. It's just trying to get it promoted where it's cost effective. Right now, it's not quite there on par with regular jet fuel. So the tax credit end of it is a big portion of it. Until we get that straightened out, it's going to be tough moving that pile forward.
Yeah, and I think the big thing that listeners need to understand is sustainable aviation fuel works. Folks like USB have put a lot of research and dollars investment into that project for a number of years, and the impact that whether you're raising soybeans in New Jersey or Maryland or Iowa or Georgia, those soybeans could certainly be fueling aircraft that transport us around the world someday.
Well, yeah, and the thing is too that looking at up in New Jersey. It's Project Elizabeth, and right around the airport, Newark. And Newark's a very, very busy airport. I mean, you
Sure
get a lot
is.
of international flights and everything else coming in. And one of the things that the SAF, looking forward to do is the health benefits also from that, where you're not having the same pollutants in the air around those communities, in inner city community. And there's a lot of work and studies that have been done in that area. So, I mean, not only is it good just for the aviation industry that way, it's also good for the environment too. I guess the biggest takeaway from everything that we're doing a lot with the soy is the takeaway that we're the good guys here. We're trying to save the environment, because so much comes down on us as farmers as, we're spraying pesticides willy-nilly, we're killing the planet, we're doing this, we're not. We're trying to save the planet.
Right. Patrick, I think you worded it very well. Growers like yourselves and others across the U.S. and beyond are here to protect the environment, because the environment is how we all make a living. And we want to be here long term. That, in my opinion, is the definition of sustainability. So Mary, USB's got resources, and you go through, just like any business, you have budgets and you allocate resources accordingly. What are some things that USB's considering right now allocating some resources towards?
Yeah, I just think it's really important as farmers, because I know that's mostly your audience that we're speaking to. But as farmers, we want to make sure that there's a lot of absolute accountability and transparency. And that's been a huge focus for our board. This is only my second year on the board, so I'm very new to it. But I wanted to, that's an expectation. That's something that's really important to me, is that, okay, if this isn't money in my pocket, but I'm offering it to this organization, are they using it wisely?
Sure.
And I've been very impressed with USB, with how they're organized and how they are spending that money and just the accountability there. So just on the transparency side of things, there's just been so many things put in place on USB. Just the software internally, like we should all be able, there's tons of projects that are going on at a moment's notice. Like there's just a lot of moving pieces, and we're all farmers, so there's a shortage of time. We need it at our fingertips so we can help make decisions and stuff. But all the projects that are being funded through USB, there's definite accountability. Before we will grant money towards an organization, there's accountability expectations. You've got to tell us what it's being used for. We've got to capture that information. It's got to be reported back to us, the farmers that serve on the board, so we know exactly, like we can log in. And even if Patrick's on infrastructure and connectivity, like I'm not seeing all of his projects. I'm seeing only my work group in health and nutrition. But if I wanted to learn more about his projects, I can just go into this software that we have and pull up the projects that they're working on, that they're making budget approvals for, and kind of just see what all is being worked on throughout our whole organization. Because right now we all have our silos, but that way it just gives us visibility, so all of us farmers can kind of see that, look at it, be aware of what's going on in other work groups. But then I think it's also just really good to know that we do fund a lot of research and a lot of new technologies, but there's a lot of accountability being asked of for those dollars being awarded, being given to these other. They've got to be very respectful and responsible with that money, and they've got to report back of how that money is working. It's a huge focus on that.
That's a great point, Mary. Again, it goes back to what Patrick talked a little bit about earlier when he explained how USB is structured, funded by growers for every bushel sold. These resources are great, but we need to manage them wisely. And it sounds like USB does a great job of oversight and holding those stakeholders accountable that are going to invest those resources into research and development for the soybean crops.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Like you said, we answer to 500,000 soybean farmers in this country. So,
right.
You're dealing with your peers there. And if you look into our investments, for every dollar we invest, it returns $12.30 to the American farmer.
Wow.
So, I mean, if, that's through investment, through exports, through everything we do. So, I mean, if you look at that and you were a trader on Wall Street, that's pretty good ROI.
I
I
probably
think
do that every day, wouldn't you?
yeah, you do pretty good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like Mary said, we're very accountable with what we do. And, we're also flexible, like she's saying, with the integration we have with the different data that we collect and everything else, that we work in a vertical manner, that from the top to the bottom, from the bottom to the top. We see all the pieces. If she's working on something, I'm interested in that.
Sure.
I can pull up health and nutrition and look into it, or vice versa. So, and once again, it makes it a lot easier for us as directors to be able to pivot if something isn't working out. Not saying we're 100% accurate all the time,
Right.
and we make all the right decisions.
Sure.
But we know when, this isn't going the way that we thought it was going to go. It's time to, stop, move.
Right. And that's just, good business sense, really, at the end of the day. Manage the resources as if they are yours, because in a sense, they are yours. So with that, I want to thank Mary Stewart, grower in Maryland, and Patrick Giberson from New Jersey. Thank you so much for joining us and educating us about USB and how soybeans can help fuel our future.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. We appreciate it. And, anytime that we can get to have a seat at the table and tell our story and have you tell our story for us, we appreciate it. And we thank you.
Thanks for joining us on FieldLink. And welcome back to FieldLink. I'm your host, Bill Smith, and on this episode, we got Jody Lawrence joining us from Nashville. Jody, how's the weather in Nashville right now?
Well, we've had quite a bit of rain, just like everybody in the Southeast and in the Delta. And I guess as the crow flies from Nashville, we're probably no more than about 150 miles from those saturated areas of southern Indiana and southern Illinois. So, yeah, we've been dodging a lot of raindrops lately.
A lot of rain throughout all parts of the country. I know I was in Arkansas this past weekend, and we got hit pretty hard there as well, continuing to get hit hard in the Delta, as well as across different parts of the Midwest. And Jody, with the good rain, lots of rain, there's some good rain too, and it's really starting to impact the grain markets. What happened to corn today, Jody?
Well, you always hate to start off any Monday like this, but the December corn lost 11 cents today after making kind of what we were hoping was a significant breakout last week, getting back above 450 to hopefully give everybody some opportunities to price some. But the U.S. weather is so good, and the forecast now looking into late June has plenty of rain and no excessive heat anywhere mentioned in any model. And with the kind of really depends on the decision of those acres that are behind now on whether they get planted or not, because we're past all of the insurance dates. But when you walk in on a Monday and in the middle of the summer and corn's down 11, you can almost guarantee it's all about weather. And everybody loves to see the rain, and everybody is wanting to produce the best crop that they can. And this is the unfortunate side effect this time of year when things go well and Mother Nature cooperates with what the crops need.
Yeah, like I say, weather is definitely impacting growers from east to west, north to south, all a little bit differently, but overall, boy, lots of moisture out there, good growing conditions, again, for the most part, across the U.S. and specifically in the Corn Belt. I'm hearing reports in the Carolinas, Virginia, boy, some of the best looking corn crop that they've had in years. So that kinds to be the theme here, and hence, we're starting to see that the markets reflect that a little bit.
Absolutely. And today's crop progress report just came out, and the places where they were dragging a little bit on planted corn acreage, you've got Illinois at 97% planted, Indiana at 93% planted, Ohio, let me make sure I go across straight here, at 89% planted. So wow. Even the lagging areas have gotten in the ground, and the whole U.S. crop is 97% planted in corn, and crop conditions went up 2% this week from 69 to 71, and 71, not that there's a hard correlation between early mid-June ratings, but they certainly lead the way without any adverse weather for the potential of trendline yield. And 71% is really, really good. And you look at beans are 90% planted, so they've got a little bit of work to do, but the initial conditions for soybeans are at 68%. This is the second week. Last week, they're up 1 from last week. So you've got a 71% good to excellent corn crop, a 68% bean crop. And for the most part, you're just in cleanup planting right now, other than the farmers that have decided to take some prevent plant in the wettest areas. So, the crop's off to a great start. And without the demand news that we would love to see out of the China-U.S. Early trade talks that are going on, we get into a position that the market just looks at the size of the U.S. crop and the potential supply from here to the end of the year.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the Chinese talks. There's been a lot of chatter back and forth across the media, about the tariffs with, Trump's policies in place. Is China going to meet with us? They're meeting in London. Agriculture isn't on the top of the list, but certainly paying very close attention.
What we like is, first of all, apparently the glacier has moved enough, or at least melted somewhat, that we are talking. You've got parties, high-level trade from both sides. This meeting apparently is starting and focusing on the rare earth minerals, those minerals that the computer chips and the AI revolution and all of this supercomputing are going to need as it moves forward, that China has and the U.S. needs to import. And so that's where they're beginning the talks. What we hope to see is the normal kind of way these negotiations work is that when things are going well, or they reach a point where some agreements have been made and some compromises, that you see some goodwill purchases, whether it's beans or corn, and a trade delegation will usually be sent to the U.S. to sign these frame documents. And it's ceremonial, but it does at least would indicate that we're heading back in the right track. Now, not saying that China, is just going to start buying everything from us, because that's certainly not the case. But it would be nice to move back to a point away from 150% tariffs and get to some sort of reasonable middle ground.
Right. Well, the good news, as you mentioned, we're in the same room. We're having conversations around some very critical things. You mentioned rare earth minerals and so forth. Those are really important, from a global perspective. Certainly agriculture is and food is, but boy, these areas here can really impact how ag goes as well.
Yeah, it sets a tone for a lot of the trade, all the trade stuff that this administration promised, that we would have this great big new tax bill saving everybody money and stimulating the economy, but we would also have dozens and dozens of new trade deals done by now, and this would certainly be welcome, that the biggest of all of them starts moving faster.
I think folks are looking for some deliverables. This just might be the front end of one of those. Jody, let's pivot a little bit. EPA's got some announcements coming forward this week, and I know farmers are really sitting around wanting to know what these results are going to be as it relates to biofuels. I know on this episode we're focusing with USB and talking a lot about biofuels. What's the EPA going to bring forward, in your opinion?
Well, this has been always a bone of contention, because it seems like this goes back, multiple administrations, not just the previous or Trump's first administration, but the battle between the biofuel industries of, hey, can you mandate this and not have the refinery exclusions and a lot of other things that kind of allow some loopholes for people to move past needing the biodiesel and the ethanol. But the industry presented probably a best case scenario. In all negotiations, you ask high and settle for something probably less than that. Mm-hmm. But the new EPA director, Zelnick, he has voiced his opinion about not being a huge fan of renewable energy at this point. And what we need to see is a hard, definitive mandate that comes out. And they said they were going to announce it up to a month ago, and then there are rumors it will come out this week. We don't expect it to be the home run for the industry that we had hoped, but we do expect it to be better than kind of the worst case rumors were when this was being pushed around 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah, definitely. There's been a lot of positioning, a lot of lobbying going on, not just in the last several months since the new administration's been put in place, but even prior to that, as you mentioned, and some big decisions coming down the road here. And it sounds like this week's going to be a pretty important week for producers as well as ethanol manufacturers.
Yeah, you just get, several of these things. You do get to a point in the crop year. And we've seen flash droughts, start in late July and go through August and take out the top end potential of a couple crops. And certainly I think that's happened twice in the last 6 years. But when you get the amount of water that's on this crop already, and we're talking, what's today, June 9th, that once you move past the weather and just say, okay, we're going to have a huge crop, then these other things become critically important so that we're not talking 360 or 365 December corn at harvest, that corn still will have a 4 in it, but we've got to find some demand. We have to get some help from all of the sources where that demand comes from. And that obviously is the renewable fuels right now. And also you look at the record price of cattle right now because the inventories are so low. Certainly, if we could expand the cattle herd, while it would push prices down for all the ranchers raising them, it would certainly put in a position to help corn and bean meal use domestically. Just another leg of the stool that we're going to have to build under this market if we're going to consistently produce 178 bushel per acre crop.
Wow. Jody, I want to thank you for joining us for this week's market update from Nashville. Look forward to having you on our next episode.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Everybody have a good week.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of FieldLink. Be sure to talk to your Helena representative to learn how Coron Metra can help feed your crops this season.